What incredible things happen when you stop settling for a life that looks good on paper and start choosing one that feels alive with the dreams and desires you haven't claimed yet. It's your host, Katie Kay, artist, mentor, entrepreneur, founder of the Creator Code, and mentor for women ready for the best chapter of their life. Are you ready for more? Fuck yes. Let's go, my loves. Hello. It is episode 4. Thank you so much for your comments, for your reviews, for the shares, just for listening and being here in this world. I am so appreciative. It's been a really big week for me, launching more, holding a live event for a beautiful circle of women, and now stepping into the regular weekly podcasting that I plan to do for the duration of this season. I have had so many thoughts about this episode. The plan that I had in place is no longer. And I love that because I love just having an open invitation to what comes up from you, from my life, and being flexible about the things I share and the order in which I share them. So I'd like to start by talking a little bit about the event on Tuesday night. As I did share in one of the previous episodes, I don't remember which one, about how much of an edge it was for me to actually decide to do a live event, and how by doing that, I was actually stepping into claiming some of the things that I was shrinking myself with, and how I really wanted to embody that in the launching of this podcast and this chapter of my life. It was such a beautiful gathering. It filled my cup. It filled my heart. I was so inspired by all of the sharing. The circle was not just for me to talk about my podcast. It was for everybody to put their voices into the field and to share how they feel about a life of more and what might be holding them back, and what are some of the questions and what are some of the hidden desires that they want for their lives. And I just appreciated that so much. I have these beautiful pieces of paper that I am keeping safe with me, of where everybody wrote down all of the things that they would like to call in, and have really shaped how I'm moving forwards, and particularly what I'm going to talk about today on this episode. So I had a really important question at the event, and I paraphrase. I did not record the question, so I can't remember exactly what the wording was, but the way I interpreted it and the way it landed in my body is, what are the practical steps that you can take towards living a life like what I'm talking about, a life of more, a life where we get to prioritize our dreams and desires and stop living from a place that looks good on paper and start living from aliveness? How do we actually do that? What are the practical steps? And I also had this come up, which is that maybe some people want less, not more. And how does that fit into this whole plan of a life of aliveness and more? What happens when your life is so full already that there is no space for more? And this is really important, really, really important, especially when women at this particular age gather, women in perimenopause, women who maybe are approaching that age, because life gets fuller and fuller as you get older. When you have children, when you have a busy career, when you have lots of obligations, maybe you have aging parents, maybe you run a business, maybe you run multiple businesses, life gets really full, and there's a lot expected of us these days. And I don't want to pretend that that's not true. I don't want to pretend that the choices I've made have been easy and I've just pressed a button and suddenly I have space, because that's not true at all. So I really want to talk about this, about when your cup is already full, and not necessarily full of what you want, but full of what you have to do. And I want to talk about the practical steps towards claiming more. How do we do this when we have full schedules, when we have children, when we have businesses, when we have full-on careers, when we're single mums, when we have a million to-dos every single week? How do we actually do this? So this is the fuck yes, how-to guide that I had to make myself because it didn't exist. And I made this from my own lived experience, and I combined it with all of the trainings that I have taken, all of the things I've learnt, all of the books I've read, all of the coaching that I've had, to create some really solid steps towards this goal. And I want to share some of those with you today. So first, I'd like to talk about the letting go, the making space. Because for some of you, and 100% absolutely for me, you have to let go of something or some things before you can invite more in, because your cup is already full. And it's not full of this beautiful elixir of life that you just want to drink up in one gulp. It's full of hard things, and you can't add more. You don't want to add more. You want less. You want to take some things out because they're exhausting. So what this can look like is quitting some habits that are getting in your way, getting in the way of you actually living the way that you want to live. It could look like leaving a relationship that you know isn't right, that isn't fulfilling you. You might have been very aware of this for a very long time and you haven't actually taken the steps. It could look like walking away from a job or a business structure or your career and changing completely. And maybe you know already on the inside, you've already actually moved on from these things. You've already decided that this has to happen, but you just haven't done it yet because you don't know how, because it's scary, because it's big, because you still have so much to do, because you have responsibilities. And usually when this happens, when we decide we want something but we haven't made the move yet, it can really start to feel quite heavy. It can start to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm stuck, I'm trapped, where it didn't feel like that before. And often that's because you've made the decision, but you haven't actually taken the action yet. And this often happens with really big things like relationships and career and jobs. It might look like walking away from friendships or other relationships that might be dimming your light, that might be draining your energy, where you might find it really hard to uphold your boundaries. And those relationships might keep you in this state of constant obligation or responsibility. And they might make your life feel uncomfortable. Perhaps when you're with these people or this person, you might feel like you don't really like yourself that much, or you're not living from a place of aliveness, that you're living from a place of obligation. You have to let go of some things before you can step into more. I had to let go of overfunctioning, and I'm going to do a whole episode about this, about overfunctioning specifically. But I had to let go of overfunctioning in my family life and in my business. They were the biggest things, because what I did with that overfunctioning was I created so much busyness for myself that I didn't have space for anything else. So I had to let go of that in order to step into more, in order to claim some of the things that I wanted. And the way that I did that was I had to redefine my entire home life. I had to redefine who does what and how we actually make sure that we all have what we need individually. There's 4 people in my family. We're all different ages. We all have different needs. And so it is a process to work out how you can still serve your children, still make sure that they have what they need to live the lives that they want, that they still have access to you, but you are also having access to your own aliveness, that you're taking care of your health, that you're taking care of your needs, that you're having me time, that you're doing the things that you want to do. And that it's shared, that it's not just one partner who gets that all the time and the other one doesn't. And I had to do a lot of rearrangement. It didn't always go to plan. It didn't always work out. There were sometimes adjustments that had to be made along the way for all of us to have what we needed. In my business, in my work, I had to redefine what I actually wanted to do. And then I had to take this really big, brave step towards doing that, which in my case actually meant that the vast majority of everything I was doing, I needed to walk away from. And that was huge. That was absolutely huge. That took me more than a year, probably more than 2 years to really make those steps. And I couldn't fit more in until I started to work on these things. And so once you do have space in your life, the process of inviting more in is actually really slow and tender, and it requires devotion on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to living from this place of aliveness, to listening to the inner voice, to listening to your intuition, to paying attention to your body, to make sure that you're on track.
You have to do that all the time. And it's not this big, quick thing. It's not just this one step into suddenly you're living in this different way. It can feel like that at times because sometimes the change or the shift that happens can be quite startling. But most of the time, there are tiny steps that need to be made. Tiny steps upon tiny steps. So when I look through these beautiful papers that the women who came to my event on Tuesday night wrote, I see things like confidence, I see courage, I see creativity, I see travel, I see calling out bad behavior, I see getting rid of the blocks, I see listening to my intuition, satisfaction, more love, more money, exploring and expanding, lightness, joy, connection, inspiration, adventures, space. There are just so many things that we all want. We can't have all of them at once, but we can design a life that encompasses them, that prioritizes them. But it takes these small, slow steps. And being okay, we have to be okay when it doesn't always go to plan. Because there are things that we're going to have to work through. You don't just step into this big, luscious life because you decided that you wanted to. It takes effort. But the effort becomes easier once you start seeing the benefits of the changes. These little steps can look really different depending on what it is that you might need. So for me, I want to talk about one of the little steps that I made that's actually become a really big step over time, which is feeding myself in a really nourishing and beautiful way. Because for at least 18 years, I have been the person in my family who takes care of feeding everybody else. And I've chosen to do that because I love preparing food, because I'm a good cook, because I care about nutrition and I have good knowledge of a balanced diet. And so that has been one of my big roles, a really important role, but it's also a role that has some burdens because I don't know how many of you listening are parents, but it's really common to have your kids say, "What's for dinner, Mum?" And when you answer, you're met with, or nothing. And that can be pretty soul destroying over a period of time. Like you just become used to the fact that nobody really cares about this beautiful meal that you're preparing and that it's always going to be some kind of a battle, whether it's a little one or a big one. And because of that role, I have not spent a lot of time prioritizing myself because that's a big job. To be the person to prepare food for the family for 18 years. That takes a lot of time and energy. And so one of the things I decided to do was to put that time and energy into me and to spend time every day preparing my own food. Because what I used to do when life was really full, when I couldn't subtract anything from my to-do list and my schedule and my obligations, was that if I was working at home, I would wait until I was starving. It would be 2:30, 3 o'clock, and I'd think, oh my God, I've missed lunch. And I would get up and I'd go to the kitchen and I'd open the cupboard and I would grab whatever I could grab. I'd open the fridge, I'd grab whatever I could grab that I could get into my face quickly and efficiently while I was still working, while I was sitting at my laptop or at the computer. And sometimes it was nutritious and sometimes it wasn't. It really depended on what was available to me on that day. But it was always rushed. It was never done with love and attention. It was always as if my mealtime was an inconvenience and that it was going to get in the way of all the other things that I had to do. And how crazy is that? How crazy is that when I'm prepared to give all that time every single day, every single week, every single month, every single year to feeding my family and not myself? And there are 2 meals every day that I need to take care of myself. 2 out of 3 meals, breakfast and lunch, that I'm on my own for. And both of those meals I treated in this nonchalant, unimportant way. And so there came a time when I decided enough was enough. And I decided to start paying a lot of loving, caring attention to how I was feeding myself breakfast and lunch. And as a result, I've completely changed my relationship with those meals. And it's become a cornerstone of my life, the preparation of food for myself. And you know what? I am so grateful to me. I appreciate me so much more than my children do. I appreciate the care. I know exactly what I love. I know how to make it look nice in a way that appeals to me. It's a beautiful ritual. My breakfast has become a really important part of my day. My lunch, I always plate it. I always make something delicious, and whilst I still might sit back at my laptop or maybe I pick up my phone to catch up on some messages, the preparation, the presentation, and the care that I put into making sure I'm nourished is completely different to what it used to be. I knew that the way that I was not caring for my own nourishment and nutrition was holding me back. I believe we always know when we're doing ourselves a disservice, right? Like, you're not going to listen to this and be like, wait, what? I didn't realize I did that. No, you're going to be listening and thinking, oh my gosh, yeah, she's calling me out. In a good way, of course. We always know in our own bodies where we could be supporting ourselves in a better way. Another really big one for me was that I couldn't prioritize my health and exercise habits. I used to be able to do this when I was younger. I did it plenty. And then life got busier. I had children. I started a business. Then I started another business. It just became too much. And particularly after the birth of my second child in my early 40s, I just found that I didn't have the space anymore. I used to go on these big luscious walks. I used to go to yoga. I used to run. I had all these amazing practices and I found it easy to prioritize them, way easier than I did in my 40s. And so what happened over time is my health started to decline. My immune system was affected. I was probably suffering from postnatal depletion without actually knowing it, but I would get sick more easily. I didn't have the energy to go and do things anyway. And over time, my body started to show the signs of neglect. And so that manifested in a couple of different ways. I mentioned in one of my previous episodes that I had a health crisis. What happened in that health crisis is it started off by me continuously getting sick. I kept getting sick. And each time I got sick, whether it was a virus, a cold, it would turn into an infection. And other things happened as well that I don't remember the exact details of. And sometime along this journey, I developed a toothache. And this toothache turned into a really serious infection. And eventually, after many, many weeks, possibly a couple of months, I don't remember the exact details now, I have actually kind of blocked this out because it was such a traumatic period of my life. I ended up having a tooth extraction, but this was not before I found myself in hospital on an IV drip, and I had cellulitis in my face, which is really serious. And it came about because this infection, we couldn't get rid of it. I was on course after course of antibiotics and the infection just wasn't clearing up. My immune system was shot and I was pushing through the pain. I was getting up and going and doing 5 shoots on heavy painkillers, and I did this repeatedly because I was scared to stop because of what it might mean to my business, to my bank balance, what burden I was going to put on my partner if I had to step away and he was left to take care of everything by himself. And of course, what happened was I got sicker and sicker and sicker, and then everyone had to stop and take care of me, which of course was not the outcome that I needed or wanted. And it was a really big wake-up call for me. I had to start prioritizing my health after that. It could have been a lot worse. I realized that. But it was a wake-up call for me to move in a different direction. And then the same thing happened, or a similar thing happened to my body. I started to develop pain in the right side of my body. I had arthritis in my foot. I had a knee that was constantly giving me pain. I couldn't sit on the floor cross-legged anymore. And I sit on the floor cross-legged all the time. I've been a floor sitter since I was a kid, and it was quite devastating to me to not be able to do that anymore. And I'd been receiving treatment from a physio and an osteo for nearly 12 months, and we were getting absolutely nowhere. And so that was a wake-up call too, that I had to go and do something about this. I had to go and strengthen my body. I had to take care of my body in a different way to what I'd been doing. So I started Pilates, and in the early days, in the first month of this, I wondered how on earth I was going to fit 2 Pilates classes into my week. I was so busy and I was so full of overscheduling and a million things on my to-do list every week that I couldn't imagine putting aside 2 hours in my week to go to Pilates. But I knew I had to. And I knew my health was important, and so somehow I scheduled this in. And before I knew it, I was feeling better. Within 6 months, my knee pain was gone, my foot pain was gone, and I felt like a different person. And so then from that place, I was able to increase my classes. Now, 3.5 years on from that time, I go to Pilates every single day. And I do not have more hours in my day than I had then. but I have changed my life in lots of ways in that time period. The commitment to yourself of saying you're going to do the thing is the first shift. So when you sit in indecision and you're constantly saying to yourself, I need to do the thing, which I did for a long time before I booked those Pilates classes. I need to do the thing, I need to do the thing. You keep yourself trapped in this place of, I don't know how, I don't know how. The how is just stepping forwards into the doing. And so you fit it into your otherwise full week. And then you realize that there was space all along. You just had to prioritize it. The truth is that we all spend time doing things that we don't need to do. We spend time doing things that other people could do, our partners, our kids, people that we could pay to do some of the things that we're doing. I'm sure listening to these words, you know straight away what I'm talking about. Sometimes we keep ourselves busy to avoid other things. Busyness can be a nervous system response. Some of the things we do, we could just let go of. We could just ditch entirely. Because by taking our time to do things we don't need to do, we're sacrificing the things that we want. We're sacrificing the things that we love. We're sacrificing the things that could change our lives, that could make us feel more alive, that could have us claiming our deepest dreams and desires. That could have us making small steps every day towards them. And this is one of the ways that we diminish ourselves, by diminishing the time that we get to spend on the things we really want to do. And as we make space for the thing that we want, we get to feel the result of that thing. That evidence that we feel, that we start to filter into our body, that we start to notice in our awareness, that changes us and that allows us to then ask for more. The best way forwards for anything that I've ever heard, ever known, ever tried is titration, which is the slow, small steps that we make towards the thing we want. And we can slowly build them on top of each other. So every time we take a step forwards, things start to shift, we open space and we can take another step and so on and so forth. I really truly believe that that is the only way to make lasting big changes in our lives. And I don't think I heard about this or understood this until I was well into my 40s. When you notice the effects of change coming into your body, in your nervous system, in your awareness, in your consciousness, it actually changes your whole energy, your whole being. You actually start to feel more energized. You start to increase your capacity. You start to look at yourself in the mirror and think, yeah, I look good today. Wow, I woke up feeling in a really good mood today. It actually can start to happen so quickly. And this is not just because the things you're doing are good for you. It's actually because you start to trust yourself. You start to trust yourself to put yourself first. You start to develop a relationship with yourself which is different from the one you had before. I want to talk for a second about some of the things that we might need to adjust, change, move. Some of them require hard decisions. Some of them require hard conversations that might cause conflict, that might cause discomfort, that might not work out the first time, that we might have to try to lean into over a period to have an effect. Sometimes we bump up against people who don't want us to change and who also might feel that they have to change because we are, and that's not easy either. So I really want to acknowledge that. So they could be, when you reprioritize things in your life, you might have to have quite hard conversations with a partner, with your children. You might have to adjust your budget, your bedtime, your schedule. You might have to go through a hard period of discomfort in order to move on to an easier period of fulfillment. Like, for example, if you decide to change your career. Usually when we say we want things to be easy, it's because they currently feel hard. It's because we're burnt out. It's because we're exhausted. It's because we're fed up with the thing that we're currently doing. It's because we feel trapped. It's because we're sick of it. We're just sick of it. I can't tell you how many times in the past few years I've just been over it, well and truly fucking over it. I'm sick of this thing that I have to keep doing, that I have to keep beating my head against. When are we going to change this thing? When can we change this thing? I just want it to be easy. Do you relate? But when you know the solution, when you can see the change, when you can feel it, your energy increases, your capacity increases. And the things that were exhausting before, they stop exhausting you. I know this from experience because it literally happened to me last year. And I want to share this little story. Last year, I worked 50 to 60 hour weeks every single week from around February until the end of August. It was one of the most trying, exhausting periods of my entire working life. And I did this because I was rebuilding my business so that I could step out of it, so that I could step away from working in it full time, and so that I could step away from the role that I'd had in the business for a really long time. Because it was exhausting me, because I was ready for other things, because I was ready for more. And I had to do the rebuilding. I had to use my skills for this one last race to the finish line to build the thing that I needed to build so that I could hand over the majority of this business to my husband and my business partner. And when it came to the end of August, which was step one of my exit strategy, I was absolutely exhausted. I was also pretty happy and victorious that I'd finally reached this step, and I wasn't 100% convinced that it was going to work. But as September started, I ceased working for 6-7 days a week for my business. And through an incredible twist of events, one of the most beautiful plot twists of my life, I found myself just as busy, but with completely different work in a completely different business very quickly. And this work felt completely different because it aligned with my soul work. It was creating this incredible online festival with my colleagues in the Kindred Meditation leadership team. And we set out to do this really incredible thing that we'd never done before. And over the period of 8 or 9 weeks that we worked on this together before we actually ran it, we had to work so hard. We had to face things that we'd never done before. We had to work them out. We worked so hard, and I was in a state of absolute fascination the whole time because I was working around the clock. I was working through a holiday. I was breaking boundaries that I normally wouldn't break, and yet I felt alive every single day. And what was amazing to me about that was that I didn't do anything to change my capacity or my energy. My capacity tripled, my energy tripled because the work I was doing, I wanted to do. And I also just want to say that I didn't hate my business. I didn't hate the work that I was doing before. It was just time for me to step away. It didn't feel aligned anymore. So it wasn't like this big dramatic thing of I'm doing a job I hate versus I'm doing a job I love. It wasn't that simple. I never hated it. It just wasn't aligned with my life purpose. It just wasn't making me feel alive. And that's a really big difference between something not making you feel alive and something that you actually hate. And so what I found fascinating about this was that in this new work that I stepped into, that I never thought would take that much time and energy, I was able to do things that I never thought I could do. And so when we say we want easy, that's not coming from our aliveness. That's coming from our exhaustion. We don't want easy. We want a life that fucking feels good. We want a life that's aligned with our dreams and desires. We want a life that in the future, if we project our mind forwards, that we know we're going to look back on and say, fuck yes. Like, wow, I'm so glad I did that. We can do hard things when we know there's something incredible we're working towards. When we're following our fuck yes and moving from our aliveness. There is so much more I could share on this topic, this fuck yes how to. This is where it crosses over into the big magic that I do in the world. How I guide emotionally intelligent, capable midlife women who are known for holding everything together, who feel the ache of more, become the woman who lives from her full body fuck yes. This is my big magic. This is my purpose, why I'm here, why I'm doing this podcast, why I'm telling you all of these things. I guide a structured expansion process, integrating somatic embodiment, parts work, and creative activation so that you can finally break free of your current reality or the parts of it that are holding you back, and you can claim the dreams and desires you've been sitting on and create a life that feels like all of the things that you've been craving, wanting, wondering how you're going to get and feel. I have so much more to share. Would you like a part 2 of this fuck yes how to? If so, please send me your questions. You can put them in the comments of the episode. You can send them to me by email if you want to stay anonymous. It's hello@kdk.com.au. This isn't easy, but it doesn't have to be done alone. Let's make this a conversation. I would love that, and I'm sure you would too. Friends, if something in this episode stirred you, if you've been sensing a pattern in your life and you can't quite name it, if you're really sick of reinventing yourself and trying to work things out, constantly looking for solutions, trying to fix things, and you want clarity without collapse, without burning it all down, I'd love to invite you into a free class. I'm going to pop the class in the show notes. It'll answer some of the questions that might have come up for you. It will orient you back to your own lived experience. And it also includes the very best somatic practice that I've ever had the privilege of learning, teaching, and practicing myself, which is kindred meditation, which is a body-based practice. You feel it in your own body. It's a communion between your imagination, your intuition, and your body. And this practice has deeply changed my own life. The class also introduces the Creator Code, which for anybody who works creatively, who runs a business, who builds things in the world, this is a really important body of work that I'm currently developing, and I can't wait to share it with you. I'd like to finish today with a closing question for you to ponder, think about as you go about your week. What are the ways that you're doing yourself a disservice in your own life? What are the ways that you might be preventing yourself from having the space to say, fuck yes, I'm ready for more? Start with the easiest thing and show yourself that you've got you. Show yourself that you know that you're worth it. Let yourself taste the sweetness of that first step or change.